We have such a fun staff here. I love being a part of this staff at Restoration Park Church. And welcome, guys. Good to see your faces. Those who are online, thank you for joining us. I hope you had a very Merry Christmas. And let me be the first to say a Happy New Year to you. Hard to believe 2020 is almost in the books. This is the last Sunday of 2020. And it has been a very challenging year, to say the least, for sure. But it's good for us to just spend some time remembering what God has done this past year. You know, I mentioned a couple weeks ago in a sermon about my wife always forgetting things. She's got a terrible memory. But one thing that she doesn't forget is to remember what God has done in her life. Now, on the opposite side here, I have an elephant's memory. I don't forget anything. I have a younger brother who is 6.5 years younger than I am. He had triplets 2.5 years ago. 38 years old, had triplets. Crazy. Well, when my kids were little, 2, 3, 4 years old, for Christmas, my brother bought my kids a drum set. It wasn't for the kids, it was to punish me. I have an elephant's memory. So for this Christmas, you know what I bought those kids? Well, let me show you. Oh, thank you, Jesus. They're 2 years old. That is amplified. It makes all kinds of obnoxious noise. There's a microphone. They sing. My brother texts me the next morning and says, I curse you. He didn't say curse. He said some bad words. I can't repeat to you. But I'm like, yes, Chad wins. I waited 17 years to do that, friends. 17 years I waited to get him back. You know, it is good to just spend some time looking back on the last year. As we usher in 2021, it is good for us to look back on this past year and be mindful of what God has done through the people of Restoration Park Church. And I want to tell you, church, when I was preparing this message, there are so many stories that I want to share with you. I can't share them. I think the Gospel of John at the very end, it says there are so many more miracles and stories that I did not put in here. There are so many God stories that I want to share with you today. Now, if we're going to be honest, 2020 has been a very, very challenging year. I know a lot of your stories. I know a lot of you have lost loved ones, have been isolated, have lost jobs. There's been a lot of things that's happened this year. It's been very, very challenging. And as a church, it's been very challenging as a leader on how we do church. It's forced us to think outside the box on how we do church. And I got to tell you, more than any other year, this has been the hardest year as a pastor. I don't get to see everyone the same way that I have for the last 9 months. And it can be hard sometimes to see, is God working in His people? How are you guys doing? It's been uncomfortable. It has stretched our faith. It has made us more dependent upon God. Can I tell you that God does some of His greatest work in the storms? He does some of His greatest work in the pandemic. And if we're going to be honest, it's just hard sometimes to see what God is doing, especially if He's not working in your life right now. But I want to share with you today some stories, and I've got a lot of stories for you. I want to frame today's message out of Psalm 145, and I want you to understand something. I'm going to share stories with you. This is not about how good we are as a church. Do you understand me? It's about how great God is. And it's amazing when God's people humble themselves and say, God, here I am, what He does through His people. So today is about giving God all the glory. And I love this church. I love the people of Restoration. But at the end of the day, God is in control and God is worthy of all our praise. So I'm going to read to you from Psalms 145, verses 1 through 7. This is the kind of frame today's message. I will exalt you, my God and King, and praise your name forever and ever. I will praise you every day. Yes, I will praise you forever. Great is the Lord. He is most worthy of praise. No one can measure His greatness. Let each generation tell its children of your mighty acts. Let them proclaim your power. I will meditate on your majestic, glorious splendor and your wonderful miracles. Your all-inspiring deeds will be on every tongue. I will proclaim your greatness. Everyone will share the story of your wonderful goodness. They will sing with joy about your righteousness. That is what we're going to do today, church. We're going to share about God's amazing deeds, and we're going to tell stories about what He has done through His people at Restoration Park Church. The reason why we testify to what God does and why we tell stories is that because it encourages our faith. It compels us to continue to take steps of faith and trusting that He is the one who is in control. If you look back in your own spiritual life, I'm sure there's been many people who have poured into your life, who have impacted you, how God has worked in them, and it inspires you, motivates you. It gives you enough courage and enough strength to trust in God. No matter what season we're going through, especially as we're going through a pandemic. And it has been a challenging year. That's why I want to spend some time looking at what God has done. Randy often says, I love this church. He's used that as a tagline since the days at Lake Avenue. I love this church. And this isn't about bragging about the church. When I think about I love this church, I love the people who go to this church. We are a laid-back bunch of people. Look at our Christmas video. We have fun. We don't take ourselves too serious, but we take our faith in Jesus Christ very serious. Amen. We want to be real and authentic, and we love this church because it's a church for all people. All people are welcome in this church and are received with grace and mercy and no judgments. When he says he loves this church, he loves what God does in His people, in His church. So we're going to look at some stories. You know, back in 2020, the very beginning, we rolled out our vision. And our mission statement was simple. It was Christ revealed, people restored. 4 simple words that pack so much meaning. The more that Christ is revealed in our life, the more that we are restored. And everything we do at Restoration circles, it filters through those 4 words. How can Christ be revealed and how are people restored? And there are 2 legs, 2 pillars that prop up that mission statement. Spiritual formation and missions. Spiritual formation is basically when we are teaching and we are doing devotions and prayer challenges. We're trying to help you discover the life of Jesus Christ that is inside every single one of us. And we encourage and give practical ways for you to uncover His life. And the more His life is uncovered, the more like Christ we become. And then the mission side of things is we want to be involved in our communities. We want to be the hands and the feet. We want to share the love of Jesus Christ wherever we are. We do global and we do local missions. And these 2 aren't separate pillars. They're actually integrated. You need both of those. Part of spiritual formation is how you serve, how you love people. And so these are the 2 things that we kind of prop up the mission statement. Christ revealed, people restored. And so as we go into these stories, the first thing I want to share is just some business with you. And even in the business of the church, you can see God's mighty hands at work. I want to talk to you about the health of the church, the state of the church, the finances of the church. I'm not going to go in great detail. But when we shut the doors down back in the middle of March, we thought, it's going to be 2 weeks. We'll just do 2 weeks. That's all it's going to be. 2 weeks turned into 3 months. 3 months has turned into 9 months and counting. And so as it started to get more and more like we're not going to be able to open the doors back up for a while, we decided that we were going to kind of freeze most of our spending. We wanted to be good stewards. We were unsure of what was going to happen with the church. Will people stay with us? Are they still going to give? I want to tell you that giving didn't drop off 1 cent in 2020. Didn't drop off 1 cent in 2020. Look at what God has done through his people. And because we froze some spending, it positioned us to help our communities even more. We have always desired to give at least 10% of all givings to mission work, to our communities. And for the first 3 years, we couldn't quite get there. But this year, we were at 11% giving back to missions. Look at what God is doing. We take our finances very serious at the church. We do book audits every single year by an independent contractor. It comes in from the outside. And every year it's a different one, and they are amazed by how clean and how detailed the books are. Cindy and Mark do a fantastic job. They're supposed to be here a few days. They're here like a day and a half. Poor Cindy and Mark are all stressed out, but man, it's wonderful. And we want accountability. Every 5 years, we do a full-blown audit. We want to make sure that we're being good stewards of what God has given us. And if you have any questions about finances, we want to be an open book. We want to be transparent with you. Feel free to reach out to us. We'll meet with you. We'll talk about that. But I'm just amazed by what God does through his people. It's been so encouraging to us. In 2018, about this time, we rolled out live streaming. People weren't coming to church every single Sunday. We did live streaming to reach people who weren't going to be here so they can be connected to us even when they weren't in the building. It was almost prophetic in nature because it prepared us for when COVID hits. And because we froze some spending, it positioned us uniquely with 4 preaching pastors and the finances. We invested time and resources and money into an online platform a bit more. It's a bit more weight to it. We have seen so many new faces come to Restoration through the online platform. Last year we had quite a few baptisms. In 2020, we had even more baptisms than 2019, church. Look at what God is doing through his people. There are people who have been isolated for 9 months, who have lost loved ones, who are alone. And I've heard hundreds. We have heard, Randy and Ethan and Wes and myself, I've heard hundreds of messages from people. Thank you for staying connected with us. It forced us to think about church in a different way. Church was always about Sunday morning. And it's important. It's good for us to get together. But it made us think about church throughout the entire week. We became a church, not just Sunday-centric, but we're there for you all week. God did that. That's what God does. It's been amazing what he has done through his people at Restoration. You know, we're going to continue, even when the pandemic ends, we're going to continue what God has done for us to pour in to our church throughout the week, not just a Sunday morning. Like he's molding us and shaping us for what he wants us to be as a church. When we look at the missional side of things, it's part of our DNA. We want to pour back into our communities. We support global missionaries, and we support some local missions and some partnerships. And I want to share with you a few stories about what God has done in our missions. We support the MacArthurs. They are from Lake Avenue. From many, many, many years ago, they're in Africa. And we've supported them for many, many, many years. And they called Randy this past year during the pandemic, and COVID really hit their village or community really hard. Took away all their jobs. They had no job, which meant no money. No money, which meant no food. Couldn't buy any food. They were begging for people to come in a store for a loaf of bread, for some kind of food. And MacArthur's called Randy and said, is there any way can Restoration help We were really in need of money. And because we were positioned where we needed to be, we were able to send $8,500 to Africa. Their entire village was able to get money and be fed. Church, look what God is doing through his people. Souls for Souls. We did this back in the fall. Love this. We asked you, for those of you who were coming here, to kick your shoes off as you leave. It was raining. It was cold that day. Some of you guys were kicking your shoes off and leaving. The shoes were for people in Haiti. They're going to be able to resell those shoes for food and for shelter and for education. Now, we were thinking, if we can get a couple hundred pairs of shoes, that's a good thing. Over 600 pairs of shoes were given away. 600 pairs of shoes. Some of those were brand new. There were some Air Jordans in there. I almost grabbed a box of those. Randy, he's a LeBron guy. He thinks LeBron's the best player of all time. Michael Jordan is the GOAT. Okay, you heard it right here. Absolutely. That'll preach, right? He said if we had some LeBrons in there, we'd have had a lot more money to give to them. I said, no, baby. Air Jordans is where it's at. 600 plus pairs of shoes. Let me tell you about the family it impacted in Haiti. Jeanette and her husband and 4 sons lost everything in an earthquake in Haiti. No job, no money. They were able to give those 600 shoes to her family. She opened her own business, started selling shoes. She bought her own home. She can feed her family, and all 4 boys are enrolled in school. Church, look what God is doing through his people. This past Christmas, just this past month, we asked you about, to partner with us on our Palmetto project. Colombia is going to become our flagship missionary. You're going to see these people for the years to come. And we asked you guys to partner with us on a well project. Now, there was 2 things we asked you to be a part of. The first one was back in the fall, we asked you, I think it was summer or fall, about purchasing handbags and purchasing bracelets made by these ladies in Palmetto. I want to show you a picture of Juana. She was one of the 4 ladies who made those purses and made those bracelets. She was the one impacted by you guys buying what she made. Rachel McKinney is our point person for our Colombia mission trip. She was just over there. And she waited an hour for Rachel to get out of a meeting so she could ask how everyone liked the bags. She was blown away by what support that she was given. Able to feed her family for 4 months, maybe even longer than that. When it came to the well project, we asked you guys to partner with us, $20,000. It's a big ask, I know. I just heard this morning, I said first service that we got over $28,000. Mark just texted me this morning and goes, no, that number's been changed. It's $34,000 has been given to the Palmetto project. When Rachel was over there a couple of weeks ago, she went to a different village. And the village was worse off than the village we're going to support the well to. And she was praying, God, if there's any way to not only give water for Palmetto, but to the village next to that, Lord, I know you can do all things. And when she heard about how much money was given, we're not only giving water to Palmetto, but to the village next door to them. Look at what God is doing, church. And it's not just giving money to some program, okay? I want to show you a person who's going to be impacted by what you give. Juana's going to be impacted. This little boy's name is Christopher. He has never had a meal cooked in clean water. He has never taken a shower or a bath in clean water. He has never had food cooked in clean water. He's never had a drink of clean water. He has a skin disease. His teeth are decaying. And for the first time, people like Christopher are going to have clean water. Church, look what God is doing through his people who humble themselves. Say, God, here I am. It's not just giving money to a church. You are giving money to things like that. For God gets the glory. For God gets all the honor. I'm blown away by what God has done this year. There's so many stories. Man, I can tell you that God has done more this year through his people than any other year at Restoration Park Church. In the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of crises, God has showed up in a powerful way. You want to hear some more stories? We serve a lot of local partnerships as well. We partner with a lot of local partnerships, and we have even our own in-house ministry. I'm sure you've heard of Restore Ministry, right? You guys give clothes to that. We got a box out. We got a little card out there. We give clothes to that, and you've heard about them for the last couple of years. They support over 40 organizations. I mean, these girls back here who are sorting clothes, they do so many wonderful things. It's become a hub in the Dayton area and beyond to give clothes to all these people who have been incarcerated. When they get out of prison, they come to Restore first to get clothes. People who have been sex trafficked, abused, come here to get clothes. And because of COVID, the ministry is completely morphed. It has changed. It's not just about giving clothes away. It's about relationships with people who come in. It's become more holistic in nature. It's not here's some clothes for a baby. It's actually making relationships with these people. People who have felt judged, condemned, criticized, ostracized, they come into Restore Ministry and they feel a love that they've never felt before. We renovated Restore Ministry this year. I want to show you a picture of one of the walls. When everyone comes into Restore Ministry, they see this: all things new. Revelation 21 says, I am making all things new. And it's not just about the clothes these people receive, it's about the love of Jesus they receive from these ladies who pour into them. No judgments, no condemnation, just grace and mercy and unconditional love. God, do you see what God is doing in this church? There's so many stories. I asked Peg for stories, and she gave me like 5. She was like, Chad, I got 500 more of those. There's so many stories. I'm going to share one, and I'm sorry, Peg, if it's the wrong one to share. There's a group of ladies on Wednesday night who come in and serve, and they sort clothes. This grandmother, her kids, or one of her kids, like a house of 5, their house burnt down. And they're living with grandma. One of the kids has leukemia. They need clothes. They come in. And the grandma was overwhelmed by the love and support she received, the clothes that she was able to give. She's talking to these girls, and she said, I don't know how I'm going to tell my kids, grandkids, there's going to be no Christmas this year. This group of ladies said, we can't let that happen. They got together. They got gift cards. They got toys. They got food. They wanted these kids who have nothing, who have lost everything, to have something special this Christmas, to know that God loves them no matter how hard this season is, that God is with you in this season. Church, do you see what God is doing through his people? I said I wouldn't get emotional. Try not to, but I can't know if I can help it or not. I get God bumps. I don't call them goosebumps, I call them God bumps. We do a partnership with the Victory Project in Dayton. It's an after-school adolescent program. And I asked Gene Saunders and his wife Julie to just send me some notes about that. They're part of this. They're part of a team that does this. And he says, mine and Julie's goals initially were to serve together and also meet people and build relationships within RPC. We've truly enjoyed our time together, serving as a couple, meeting some great people from Restoration, and even reconnecting with an old buddy from high school that's on the VP team as well. What we didn't expect is a passion for these kids, where we want them to be whole again. Most recent experience, as the routine goes, the team prepares the food buffet style. The boys and their adult leads assemble in the dining hall where we introduced ourselves, all 30 and 40 kids and 9 adults. The funny thing is, we all tell our age, and I'm sure Randy has been lying the entire time. These are Gene's words, not mine. Then after all the kids and leaders have been served, our team fixes our plates and we disperse to find a spot to eat with a group of kiddos, just talking and getting to know each other. This particular evening, I was walking in the dining hall looking for a group of kids to sit down with. I caught my wife's eye. She was clearly giving me direction where and with whom to sit. Like any good husband, I followed her direction. And it wasn't with her. It was 2 15, 16-year-old boys that clearly had enough dialogue between themselves that as a 54-year-old man was anything but comfortable to interrupt and to try to show how cool I was. As you can imagine, me being the old guy, I introduced myself, asking their names. They just stared at me at first. But once they realized I was there to stay, they both were very polite and introduced themselves. I asked the questions such as how old, what grade, where do you go to school, etc. One of the young gentlemen was clearly trying to show me how hard he was. He talked about being locked up and just getting out of jail. And I'm wanting to respect his privacy, but at the same time, I didn't know if I believed him. He looked like what one of my children would have looked like at 15. Didn't look necessarily rough, nor what I would expect a teenager to look like that has been locked up for so long. But I could hear the hardness in the tone of his voice. To make a long story short, he had been removed from his home after the police were called there for a disturbance. His mother was intoxicated, or as he put it, totally trashed. Dad's not in the picture at all. So his lockup was for his protection. When his mother came to pick him up from lockup, they kept him locked up because she was drunk when she came to pick him up. It took a while to get down to these facts. He was trying to shield his mother and take some of the blame. He wants nothing more right now than to go back to his mother. But for now, he'll remain in the protective custody of a group home in Dayton. And group homes, friends, are not good places. He knows what his mom and dad should be doing and haven't done in his life. Gene continues, as if his mom's situation wasn't heartbreaking enough. This young emphatically said he wouldn't graduate high school. When I pushed him on that, he replied, have you ever heard of cause and effect? I've been in so many schools I can hardly count. I'll just get me a job and work for my money. Gene continued to press in with this kid. Gene says, at a point, I'm holding back tears. The discussion I had with my own kids when they were this age. About what career, what college you're going to go to. This kid's life is hard for no fault of his own. And Gene said, I'm going to walk with this kid all the way to the aisle when he graduates high school. Because this kid hasn't had a dad, hasn't had people pour in and love him. Church, do you see what God does to his people? I'm going to share one more story, and I might get through it, I might not. I got so many more stories I want to share with you. So many more stories. On December 7th, it was a Monday, we did a day of honor. We brought in 10 young women. They have been sex trafficked. They've been abused. Faced addictions. They've been ostracized. They've been treated like trash, cast to the side. A couple organizations, along with Restore, decided to have a day of honor and do a beauty pageant for these 10 young women. My wife, who's a hairstylist by trade, I know I'm bad advertisement for her. I promise you, she does hair for a living. And this is all ears and all nose, I know. She was a part of it. There's hairstylists, people who were doing makeup. They had jewelry, clothes. They were fed. They were loved on. They shared testimonies at the end. One of the girls said this: "Thank you for reminding me I am beautiful." Thank you for reminding me I am beautiful. Thank you for reminding me that I have a purpose, that I matter. Church, look what God did. Look how God shows up in the work of his people. When I think about the woman who wrote that, it reminds me of the story. The woman caught in adultery, and Jesus stands in the gap. He says, I don't condemn you. When I see the Christopher going to get clean water, it reminds me of the least of these. When you fed me, when you fed them, you fed me. I love this church. Not because we're awesome people, we're without sin or something. It's because we seriously want to seek after the life of Jesus Christ, and we want people to experience that in their life. That all people are welcome. No matter what's happened in your life, God has a different story for you. And he does his greatest work through his people who humble themselves and say, God, here I am. Church, there are so many more stories I want to share with you. I don't have time. And I know in the midst of a pandemic, when it seems like life doesn't make sense and it's been a challenge, can I tell you that God is doing some of his greatest work? And he's been gracious enough to allow us to be a part of that with him. I want to thank you for sticking with us. I want to thank you for being with us. I want to thank you for your generosity and your faith and your servant's hearts. For I see God working through you, which inspires me to continue. Because God is doing a wonderful work, church. In 2021, here we come. Let's pray. Father God, I thank you. I'm so thankful that you show us your grace. You show us your mercy. You show us that you're working. And in the midst of struggle, and in the midst of a pandemic and trials and tribulations, God, you do some of your greatest work. And Lord, thank you for allowing us to witness a small part of that. And Lord, may we be encouraged and compelled to continue to take a step of faith, trusting in you, for you are the one who is worthy of all praise and all glory. And it's in you we trust. It is in you we hope. And we know no matter what it is that we go through, you will never forsake us. You will never leave us. So Lord, thank you for 2020. I even thank you for some of the hardships, because Lord, in that you have showed yourself faithful. Lord, would you be glorified? As we sing this song, holy, 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 we're going to magnify, we're going to celebrate your goodness. So church, would you please stand with me?